Let me take a shot at, what explains this huge interest these days. Brand building, people are increasingly finding, is the only way to build a stable long-term demand. I think we all know this feeling. Because if you're only as good as your last product, then it tends to get a bit breathless. And brand building helps you develop greater stability in your demand. Brand building is also the tool that helps you add those intangible values on top of your product performance that entice and bond customers. And we all know again that to keep a customer is many times more profitable than to try to acquire a new one. So it helps in that way as well. Brand building helps you build and hold decent margins. I don't mean profiteering. Because one of the important measures of the success of a brand is its ability to command a better price. And when it commands a better price and is in the right hands, then it sets a nice positive cycle into motion, because a lot of that surplus then gets redeployed into innovation, development, and so on. Brand building also provides you a firm base of expansion into new areas. So if you're a Tata, then, you can go from a truck to a tea to a salt with very little difficulty if you have a strong brand. And finally, an aspect of branding which is rather less understood these days, which is brand building actually helps a company become more attractive to work for and deal with. Because if you're Tata Motors, you compete in the marketplace with Mahindra and Mahindra, with Toyota and so on. But when you're on the campus, you compete with Wipro and Infosys and Satyam. And that may be a whole another ball game. Now, I wish to submit to you that like a lot of other communities, we, the marketing community, tend a little bit to speak to ourselves. We're all jumping onto this new bandwagon, brand building. And some of us, I suspect, feel that this is the one magical tool that will let us off the hook somehow. This is the one thing that will make our lives a little easier, because we all know how hard product differentiation is becoming. However, what we are not hearing, I'm afraid, is what consumers are saying. Because the wake-up call has been on for some time now. As Romit was saying, we now have this new phenomenon called the NGO stake taker. We all know about stakeholders, but occasionally you have people who grab a stake. They take a stake and they write blockbusters like this one, which gain tremendous amount of currency with consumers. Now this is a woman, as Romit was saying, who has come out into the open and calls brands the gloss of capitalism. She believes that brands are tools which are used by the corporate world to manipulate and exploit consumers, because, if there's no difference between product X and product Y, why should I pay so much more for a brand? Now, if those of you believe that, this is in the West and what relevance does it have to India, the fact is that these people have their friends in India as well. And these are our new nemesis. This is the lady called Sunita Narayan, who brought the bottled water manufacturers, the soft drink manufacturers to their knees. And they seem to be getting through to consumers, because all around, in my trade, I have to go listen to consumers every week. And some of the things that consumers are telling me are not very pleasant at all when it comes to brands. Because all around, there's a tremendous scarcity of trust. Try telling a consumer that you want to launch a new bank, as I had to do on behalf of one of my clients a couple of years ago. And they'll tell you that after UTI, I won't put my money into a new bank, even if the Tatas or the Birlas are behind it. Try going to a consumer and saying, I want to launch a food product from a multinational company. And they'll tell you, the multinationals are the ones that disappoint me the most, because we don't believe in Indian standards. You can get an ISI mark for 5 lakhs, but look at what the multinationals are doing. Even fruits and vegetables are grown artificially by injecting chemicals and colors. So whom do we trust? You want to give the best to your family and you pay more, but finally you're cheated from everything. Water, Pepsi, Cadbury's, you name it. There is, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of angst and bitterness out there if only we listen to it. Now against this societal context, let's look at some of the big mega trends that are sweeping across the world of brands. The first question I think that we're all asking is the old single line classic FMCG brand not the relevant model anymore? I grew up in marketing in the 80s, and we were taught by the P&G school of thought that you have one product, one target consumer, one proposition, one brand. The Americans always believed that they invented marketing. And they would laugh at the Japanese because they would say, these guys don't understand about brands. What are these corporate brands they try to build? Yeah, so you had a Sony, and you had a Canon, yeah, and you had a Honda. It turns out that the Japanese may well have been right, because today you see the kind of economics that a brand like LG or Samsung derives here in this country, where it cuts across categories and spends, a certain composite sum, but it works right across various other categories, so that the TV marketer coming from India finds it very hard to deal with the synergy of an LG or a Samsung. Now, what is behind this whole emergence of the company as brand model? Firstly, consumers are becoming more confident, they're becoming more knowledgeable, and more distrustful. You have mass stock ownership, and lay consumers speak with a tremendous amount of knowledge about companies, and they're unwilling to be as respectful as they used to be in the past. Secondly, it's increasingly difficult to cope with the new economics of brand building. This is an estimate by Hamel and Prahlad. It says it takes on the order of $1 billion of advertising to build a significant share of mind across North America, Asia, and Europe. That's 5,000 crores. And you're finding that behemoths like Unilever are desperately trying to rationalize their portfolios because they can't handle these unwieldy architectures anymore. And then you have the advent of the service economy, because virtually everything can be thought of as a service. Even BMW, the archetypal manufacturing company, makes 2/3 of its profits from servicing and leasing cars now. It has, in fact, become a service brand. And increasingly, the service elements are the main differentiators. When I used to work for Kodak, I remember, in Australia, we were struggling with tremendous product parity because Fuji was coming in. Every time we launched a product, Fuji would come in, and we realized that it was a mug's game, that there was no more differentiation on film. And that's when we realized that there may be an opportunity in the way we handled our photo finishing labs. And a whole new opportunity, arose, which was capitalized to differentiate the brand on the basis of a service element. Similarly, when we were working with Asian Paints a few years ago, we found that Asian Paints is one of those iconic companies that consumers love, a very frustrating company to work for, because consumers don't believe that they can improve in any way. And we struggled and we struggled and we struggled. And then we used a projective technique where we put consumers in a situation where we said, if you were to put all the paint companies in the dock, what would you accuse them all of? And they came up with the answer, a reliable painter. That's what I mean, a reliable painter. And from there came the whole idea of starting a home solution service, which is the first service of its kind in the world. And we'll have KBS Anand talk about it in some detail later. Similarly, you've got a brand like Lakme now, which derives a huge part of its total revenue from the salon business. The service part of the business is becoming very, very large indeed. We all know this. Product differentiation keeps leveling off. Early on in my career, I used to find myself quoting the Unilever type of client to the Citibank type of client. Towards the end of my time, I found the reverse was beginning to happen, which is I was quoting the Citibank kind of client to the Unilever kind of client. Because when we used to work with Unilever in the old days, you had a minimum of 18 months lead time. You launched a product, you invested in the technology, you put it out in the market, and competitors would take about 12 to 18 months to catch up with you. When you launch a phone banking service from Citibank, you find that within 7 days, Standard Chartered Bank, Chase Manhattan, will have a similar service, with collateral printed, all out in the marketplace. The lead times had shrunk from 18 months to 7 days. Now, therefore, it makes no sense to brand products anymore in those kinds of contexts. It makes far more sense to brand cultures, to brand companies, to say, for instance, that Citi banking is a way of banking. It's a way of treating a consumer, a customer. And then there is the fact that the scope of branding has broadened to the extent that even B2B marketers, now these guys used to be more rational guys, and you don't understand what's with them because they've also jumped onto this bandwagon. Yeah? But they are really, really looking very seriously at branding as an opportunity to understand and leverage themselves. Look at the kind of B2B brands that have emerged in the recent past. Got Wipro, got TCS, DHL, Infosys, very, very powerful brands. And the amazing thing about these brands is that they actually know and understand this multiple stakeholder thing much better. They don't try to build their brands just with consumers and customers. They go all round and look at all their stakeholders and build brands on that basis. You take a typical brand today, and what does it have to deal with? It has to deal with employees because it needs, as we said, to attract the best talent. It needs to deal with shareholders because you're accountable to them. You need to deal with government because you have to influence policy. You need to deal with partners because you want to attract the best alliances. You need to deal with journalists, experts, financial analysts because you want to spread favorable word of mouth. You need to deal with suppliers because you want the best credit terms and the best prices. And of course, you need to deal with customers and retailers to build that sustained demand. But a lot of the times, you just need to deal with the rest of the public to build that buffer of goodwill. You know, there used to be this old term in accounting called goodwill. And that's really what a brand is all about, to build a buffer of goodwill. Because you can be an Infosys, or you can be a Coke, or you can be a Pepsi, and every now and then, you can even be a Tata, and there may be an accident in your plant, and you will need that buffer of goodwill to kick in for you. In fact, if you look at stakeholders, they almost form a web. This is an exercise we once did for one of our clients called the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And you'll see there how these various, stakeholder groups deal with each other. There's animal rights groups, anti-gambling pressure groups, etc. And you have to meander, through all of this. You have to manage your brand's reputation through this stakeholder web. And here is a interesting quote from this wonderful book called The Naked Corporation, because that's what corporations are becoming more and more. It says, we are entering an extraordinary age of transparency, where businesses must for the first time make themselves clearly visible to shareholders, customers, employees, partners, and society. Financial data, employee grievances, internal memos, environmental disasters, product weaknesses, international protests, scandals and policies, good news and bad, all can be seen by anyone who knows where to look. You may be the proud owner of a Titan watch, but with mass stock ownership, you open the newspaper, the pink newspaper these days, because everybody reads the Economic Times, everybody reads the Business Standard. And you find there that, say, the, European project is not doing that well, or maybe Tanishq is, having a bit of a problem. And suddenly, as one consumer said to us in one of our groups, my watch doesn't look all that good to me anymore. So, you've got this kind of situation, and transparency is therefore an imperative, because more and more, you're realizing, as the old saying goes, if you try to always tell the truth, then you don't have to remember what you said the last time. So with B2B, more and more, clients are looking to build organizational relationships beyond the personal relationships. If Toyota feels simply more comfortable with Tata Steel, because apart from the product performance, there is a cultural fit, that they sense a certain integrity, a certain long-term commitment, then that becomes the basis of the relationship. That becomes the basis of the differentiation. It is based on repeated use and the assurance which comes from not being let down. It goes into the space of cultural fit and brand values. Some of the questions that arise, the first one, as the lines between brand strategy and corporate strategy start blurring, Does brand building now need to be influenced by the ideas of people like Michael Porter, Gary Hamel, C.K. Prahlad, and so on? For instance, if brand strategy is increasingly overlapping with corporate strategy, to what extent is the notion of core competence, a bundle of idiosyncratic organizational skills underpinning the brand's proposition, becoming a key factor in brand strategy? Now, this is nothing new, ladies and gentlemen. We all know that a lot of great brands start because somebody knows how to do something really well. Somebody knows how to make something really well. And it can be Sardar's Pav Bhaji in Haji Ali. It can be, Ganguram's Mishti Doi. It can be Haldiram's Bhujia. Or it can be Honda's engines. At the root of all branding is the underpinning in a competence, a skill set. The second question is, what role does the company vision play in a brand strategy? When a company defines its value system, when a company defines its sense of purpose and says, this is the difference we will make to people's lives. When a company is very clear about what goals it sets, in many, many ways, a lot of consumers are beginning to vibe with that kind of differentiation. They're saying, I know these guys, I know what they're trying to do, I understand them. And then comes this other question. If the company is the brand, who is the custodian of the brand today? When I grew up in the 80s in marketing, the average brand manager was a 20-something, scurrying around with his Nielsen numbers in the Hindustan Levers, etc. And today we're finding more and more that Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt is the brand manager at Titan. Just as before him, Mr. Xerxes Desai used to be the brand manager. Oshim Ghosh is the brand manager at Orange. Because brand building and brand strategy is now just too central a subject to be entrusted to a 20-something. So, once again, the old FMCG model is giving way to the new service model, and the CEO is more and more the real brand manager. My next question is this. Given consumer cynicism today, how much credibility does above-the-line communication still have? And how can we effectively control and use unconventional but higher credibility forms of communication, such as word of mouth? More and more consumers find it hard to believe in advertising. More and more they tend to believe their own experiences, their own family, their own friends. And they learn to adopt brands which make a difference to their lives fairly quickly, irrespective of whether they're spending money on advertising or not. A lot of brands in India as well have been built on word of mouth in the recent past. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this wonderful book called The Tipping Point, which talks about this whole idea of buzz versus the idea of hype. Moving on, when you look at those kinds of brands in service industries, to what extent does the staff become the primary communication medium rather than advertising? And what are the implications in terms of the role of HR in brand strategy? HR and marketing have traditionally worked as separate streams. They don't even talk to each other. But with these new brands, for instance, you take a Jet Airways, another brand, a marvelous brand, a brand to be proud of, because it's a world-class service brand that this country has produced. Very little advertising. Word of mouth, based on excellent service delivered by a staff member who understands what that brand is all about. Max New York Life, another very interesting brand in the insurance sector. Invests a huge amount in training, spends very little in advertising, but a huge amount in training. And they're building world-class service brands in India on that basis. Our own experience at Momentum when we worked with BPCL and did the Pure for Sure work for them. I remember when we talked to consumers, they found that the great majority of advertising that came from the petroleum companies was this motherhood and apple pie statements from a great height, which they never really connected with. What they connected with, what they responded to, was the guy on the forecourt. And as they put it in typical Bombay lingo, if that guy is an uneducated bhaiya, then you can keep on, giving me all those great messages from a great height. They don't make any sense to me. So there's a great role for HR and training, and brands like Singapore Airlines spend hundreds of millions of dollars on training, on the basis of which they've built, one of the most profitable airline in the world. Considering these increasing costs of mass media, why has the notion of integrated marketing communication still not caught on in India? Has it? It's a question we're going to go into. It's a question we're going to debate. But elsewhere, huge brands are being built without any use of advertising whatsoever. This is the example of the Body Shop, which is a marvelous brand which connects with today's thinking woman. And the owner of this business uses cause after cause. And she takes social activism. And she's very famous for saying, who the hell needs advertising? An even more successful brand is Swatch. Yeah, a maverick company, a maverick brand, chose to go the other way and built on the basis of great events, great sponsorship, the largest selling watch brand in the world. And in the midst of all these trends, these are some of the questions we're going to go into, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm happy to say that we have been successful in carefully picking some very thoughtful practitioners. They are not necessarily the usual suspects in branding, but some of the most thoughtful practitioners are going to join us over the next 2 days. And I'm sure they're going to share a great deal of wisdom and a great deal of experience with us. And I'm sure that we'll learn an enormous amount from you, the audience as well. But the biggest question of all is going to be perhaps this one. In the midst of all these trends, are there still some basic timeless truths that continue to be valid? Do the Naomi Kleins and the Sunita Narayans, in fact, do a grave injustice to brands? Is everything going to change? Or in fact, are some of the truths going to remain timeless ones? Are brands really, instruments of manipulation and exploitation? Are they in fact positive, virtuous cycles that help a company build trust, its reputational capital, quietly over many, many years? Now, when I say those words, the brand that comes to my mind, and some of you may not agree with this, is the brand Tata. And why do I say this? I say this because it's an interesting example. It's a brand which achieves instant acceptance, whether it launches a salt or a truck. You carry a Tata visiting card, as one of their employees once told me, and it opens all kinds of doors, whether of a government official or a foreign collaborator. And the government official doesn't treat you the same way as he treats someone else. He doesn't expect the same things from you because he knows you're different. It makes companies and employees want to be taken over by them, whether it's a Daewoo or a Nat Steel. Companies want to be taken over by the Tatas. And yet, it's a very quiet brand actually. It's an understated brand which is almost shy. And in this group, there is an iconic company. This is something we found in a recent survey, that the volume of spurious products sold in the name of Tata Steel in certain parts of India exceeds 3 times the volume of genuine products. At a key point in its history, when most other employees would have welcomed nationalization, the employees of this company shut the gates and said, who's going to take over this company? They resisted nationalization. So it's a company which has built a relationship with consumers and customers. It's also built a very special relationship with a very key stakeholder group, which is its employees. And it has this, above all, this amazing uniqueness, this idiosyncrasy called Jamshedpur. It has the unique distinction of building and running an entire town for nearly 100 years. Other companies build townships. This company has actually built a town of 10 lakh people, of which 8.5 lakh people it has nothing to do with, because only 1.5 lakh of those people depend on the Tata Steel Company in some way, shape or form. Out of its P&L account, every year it spends nearly 100 crores to run this town. And you can drink water out of the tap. The only city in the country where you can drink water out of the tap. Diarrhea and dysentery are unknown. You can't buy a voltage stabilizer in Jamshedpur. It has 100% immunization. It has a better green cover than Bangalore. And this is the idiosyncrasy of Tata Steel. Brands are above all about creating a climate of goodwill. And I think the Tata Steel Company does a great job of that. Brands are above all about uniqueness. And I think this is a very unique entity.